It cannot go unnoticed that since the pandemic restrictions lifted, in the UK at least, cinema offerings have been overwhelmed by sequels. Odds alone would suggest that some of these films are good. Namely, this one. Seeing the amount which are being released, scheduled to be released, I thought it'd be good to take a closer look at what makes a good sequel.
Are you suggesting that someone's trying to make a real-life sequel?
Stab 2? Who'd want to do that? Sequels suck.
No, wow.
Come on, man.
Oh, please. By definition alone, they're inferior films.
It's bullshit generalization. Many sequels have surpassed their original.
Oh, yeah?
Name one.
Yeah.
Aliens, far better than the first.
Yeah, well, there's no accounting for taste.
Thank you, Ridley Scott rules. Name another.
No, Aliens is a classic, okay? Get away from her, you bitch.
I believe the line is stay away from her, you bitch. It's film class, right?
Yeah, gotcha. Whatever, you know what I mean.
Another.
T2.
You've got a hard-on for Cameron.
Big one.
But wait a second. The first Terminator is historical.
Yeah. Sarah Connor. Yes. Wait, phone.
All right, okay. House 2, the second story.
The entire horror genre was destroyed by sequels.
I got it, by the way. I got it. The Godfather, Part 2.
That clip was from Scream 2, which ironically is a great example of a bad sequel. The original Scream, which shouldn't be confused with the fifth film in the series, also called Scream, was released in 1996 and directed by horror legend Wes Craven. The story follows Sidney Prescott and her friends, who are being stalked and killed by a ghost-faced killer. It features a lot of self-referential comedy about the nature of horror films, and has a brilliant twist ending. Scream 2 was released just under a year later. The story follows Sidney Prescott, who is now at college, and she and her friends have been stalked and killed by another ghost-faced killer. It features a lot of self-referential commentary about the nature of horror sequels, and at the end, it has exactly the same twist as the first film. Both films were undeniable hits, but number 2 didn't have the impact that number 1 did, basically because the audience had already seen it. Let's look at something else. 1981's Arthur starred Dudley Moore as a millionaire drunkard who's being forced to marry a woman he does not love out of fear of being disinherited. He's really in love with a working-class New York shoplifter played by Liza Minnelli. Arthur follows his heart rather than the money and has to live as a pauper. But because it's a romantic comedy, they manage to tie things up so nicely that he can keep the cash and be happy too. Again, it was a huge hit, so a sequel followed in 1988. In Arthur 2, On the Rocks, Dudley Moore and Liza Minnelli's characters are made poor again and forced to live as paupers. Arthur's wife leaves him and insists that he marries someone he does not love for financial security. But Arthur follows his heart rather than the money, and because it's a romantic comedy, they manage to tie things up so nicely that they can keep the cash and be happy too. Arthur won 2 Academy Awards. Arthur 2 won a Golden Raspberry. I loved these characters in the first movie, but if I want to see him doing the same thing a second time, I'd re-watch it, wouldn't I? What I'd like to see is him doing something else. You might think that I'm just picking on a couple of sloppy sequels, but this is a problem which has dogged the horror world for years. In 1978, John Carpenter released the slasher classic Halloween, in which an escaped mental patient in a mask stalks a female babysitter and her friends. It was a hit, so what followed was a myriad of sequels. With the exception of these 2 films, they all followed the same formula. A masked killer stalks people, stabby stabby, killy killy, yawn. Here's the screenwriter Max Landis talking about the same issue on the Bret Easton Ellis podcast.
And I used to pitch on shit like this all the time. I pitched a movie called Jason to the Friday the 13th people, but it was the rights have been tied up all over the place forever in different ways. But Jason was about Jason is captured. He is captured finally and brought to a facility. And it is a thriller. It's a full genre switch. He doesn't wear the hockey mask after the first 10 minutes. You have an incredible prosthetic makeup. And it is a movie about what the fuck's been going on with this unkillable thing in the woods. And you end up finding out the scientist who leads the project, her wife and her daughter both died in a car accident. And she's been trying to find a way to bring people back to life. So even though she keeps saying, like, I have overseers and stuff, really her and her 3 interns and the people who work for her in this bunker she's made are the only people, and they're biomed people. And it's deconstructing Jason. And it's this very intimate experience as you see Jason. So he's sort of the main character. It's almost like Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I would have taken Michael Myers' fucking mask off. I would have ruined Halloween. Instead of doing like an extra version, I would have been like, it's time Michael Myers says something to Laurie Strode. And then I would spend 3 years figuring out what that should be. About their connection, about their lives. That's why I appreciate the end of Halloween Kills for a little while was, yeah, beat his ass. Beat him down. Fuck yeah. And there's a moment in an earlier Halloween, I think 5, where like literally 20 guys roll up with machine guns and shoot Michael Myers 1,000 times.
I remember that.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, fuck it. Go take the mask off. It's done. It's done. We all know it's done. These characters are not horror characters anymore. Chucky, Freddy, Jason. They are mascots. We want to get to know them. It's time. That's why the TV show is called Chucky, not Child's Play. How cool would it be if you're following a character for the entire first act who is a homeless man, who is like has a limp and is all fucked up, and then you're following him and you witness his plight, and then you realize that was fucking Michael Myers when he puts the mask on at the end of the first act. And he's the protag of the movie. And you actually end up understanding his relationship to Laurie, why he's interested in Laurie.
Of course.
Just like, let's go. Like, and people would say, but that ruins the enigma. Well, they respected the enigma in all 3 of these movies, and they're polarizing films. So why not, if you're going to make something polarizing, go nuts on it. What about a movie about just what Michael does when he's not killing people? Michael lost in the woods and he encounters 3 campers and they don't know that he's Michael Myers. And they encounter him without a mask on and they like help him get out of a bear trap. And you're sitting there like, now he's going to kill them. 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 He doesn't do it. And then he's kind of following them and that guy's following us. But then it becomes like an emotional story about them and this homeless guy in the woods. And you call that Halloween and it's about the masks we wear. And there's a big emotional arc and Michael Myers fights a bear. I don't know. Just anything other than Michael Myers stabbing people in a house with a knife.
I know that Max Landis has fallen out of favour of late for one reason or another. But despite my issues with the movie Bright, I think he's a very entertaining writer and he makes some good points. Let's look at some of those sequels listed in that scene from Scream 2. Aliens is James Cameron's sequel to Ridley Scott's film Alien. It's up for debate whether it's better than the first film or not, but it's pretty universally agreed to be a good film. Despite the size of its sets, Ridley Scott's Alien is a small movie about a few people in space dealing with an alien form the likes of which they've never seen before, and from which Ripley is the sole survivor. But when it comes to the sequel, it isn't Sigourney Weaver doing all the same shit for a second time. No, she wakes up 57 years later and all the wiser. And when she's confronted by lots more of the aliens, she knows how to deal with them. It takes the end point of Alien, and rather than undoing it and starting again, it builds upon it. Terminator is about a cyborg assassin who travels from 2029 to 1984 to kill Sarah Connor before she gives birth to John Connor, who will lead the resistance in the future. Terminator 2 Judgment Day is set 11 years later. The future resistance leader is now 10 years old, and a Terminator has been sent from the future not to kill him, but to protect him from further attempts on his life, and the boy and the robot go on to form an unexpected bond. Francis Ford Coppola's Godfather is about an Italian-American crime family, the Corleones, headed by Don Vito Corleone. Don's youngest son, Michael, is given an offer he can't refuse and joins the mafia, where he rises from the very bottom to eventually replace his father. Whereas Godfather 2 is both sequel and prequel, this time it's got a non-linear narrative. We see young Don Vito coming to America as an immigrant, juxtaposed against the story of Michael Corleone, trying to expand his family business into Las Vegas. As for House and House 2, I haven't seen either. So, let's move on. The Matrix was another huge hit when it came out in 1999. It's about a computer hacker who goes by the name Neo, who discovers the world in which he lives is a simulation that he can control if he just lets go of what he thinks he knows. It was followed by 2 sequels, The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions, which built upon the saviour narrative until it turns into a heavy-handed Christ metaphor. These are not bad sequels. They build upon the films which came before them. They're just not great films. Overlong, erratically paced, and loaded with exposition. Sure, they have some merit, they're just not a lot of fun. That being said, it still makes more narrative sense than The Matrix Resurrections, which was released in 2021. The fourth film undoes the Neo is the Saviour story, which we've been watching for 3 movies, and rewrites the narrative so Neo and Trinity are now the power couple. It's actually an alright film. It's just not a very good sequel. Clerks, or to use the American pronunciation used within the film, Clerks, is a breakout indie film in which the main characters, Dante and Randall, suffer through a typical day working in a convenience store. It was low on budget but big on laughs, and it had a lot of heart for a film with such a dirty mouth. 12 years later, it was followed by Clerks 2. Dante and Randall have aged, but not grown up. They still work in a dead-end job, but this time it's a burger bar, and they still have puerile conversations, which on the whole are very funny. The second movie is about moving on with your life and accepting some responsibility. It ends happily with the characters a lot of people have grown to love through endless rewatching, settling down and becoming business partners. Part 3 followed 16 years later and undoes that happy ending. Dante and Randall are still dissatisfied with their lives, just like in number 2, and after a near-death incident, Randall decides to take on more responsibility and to do something with his life, which we were led to believe was a lesson he'd already learned. I like the Clerks films, but number 3 bummed me out. Not because it was bad, it isn't. A bad film would not make you feel that sad, you'd be bored. But it bummed me out because it undid that warm feeling I had at the end of Clerks 2. It made me think of that old Orson Welles quote. If you want a happy ending, that depends, of course, on where you stop your story. I'm sure there are some people who will be wondering at this point why I haven't mentioned Star Wars. Well, the truth is I'm not a huge Star Wars fan. I've seen all the movies, they're just fine. I don't have a strong opinion about the sequels. So here's George Lucas talking about it himself.
Let me just talk about the upcoming Star Wars, The Force Awakens. How do you feel about it?
Disney, who was a little nervous. There's one of the issues was the first 3 movies had all kinds of issues. They looked at the stories and they said, we want to make something for the fans. So I said, all I wanted to do was tell a story of what happened. It started here and it went there. And it's all about generations and it's about, the issues of fathers and sons and grandfathers. And it's a family soap opera. Ultimately. We call it space opera, but people don't realize it's actually a soap opera. And it's all about family problems and it's not about spaceships. So they decided they didn't want to use those stories. They decided they were going to go do their own thing. And so I decided, fine. But basically, I'm not going to try to, they weren't that keen to have me involved anyway. But at the same time, I said, I'm not going to, if I get in there, I'm just going to cause trouble.
Although he is given to waffle somewhat, I think George Lucas and I are saying pretty much the same thing. Which is, on the whole, it is better to do something different in a sequel. And if you can do that without undoing what came before it, then more so the better. I just want to look at one more film and its follow-up, as I have an idea.
Joliet, Jake, and Elwood Blues.
The Blues Brothers is about a musician, Jake, who was released from prison. He visits the orphanage in which he grew up with his brother, Elwood. The penguin, or nun, who runs the joint, says the home is in need of money quickly. Jake vows to gather the cash, and by honest means. The musicians travel around Chicago, gathering former members of their band so they can reform and pay back the orphanage. But en route, they manage to piss off the Illinois Nazis and one hell of a lot of police officers. The Blues Brothers is on my top 5 favourite films of all time. I could watch it any day of the week, at any time of day. If I've seen it less than 50 times, I would be very surprised. So when in 1998 a sequel came out, I was desperate to go see it.
Just when Elwood Blues thought he was all alone in the world,
young man, snap out of it!
He found family.
Hi, how you doing? How you doing?
Blues Brothers 2000 is about a musician, Elwood, who's released from prison. He visits the orphanage in which he grew up with his brother, Jake. The penguin, or nun, who runs the joint, says the home needs money quickly. Elwood vows to get her the cash, and by honest means. The musician travels around Chicago, gathering former band members so they can reform the group and pay back the orphanage. But en route, they manage to piss off the Russian mafia and one hell of a lot of police officers. I really wanted to love this sequel. I'd bought the soundtrack long before the film came out and listened to it constantly. In fact, if I'm honest, I still listen to it quite a lot. I think I'd convinced myself that the film was brilliant before I'd even seen it. As a result, the disappointment of part 2 hit me hard. The musical numbers are all enjoyable, but the story is nothing more than a retread of number 1. And I'd seen that film 50 times already. Having listened to a hell of a lot of John Landis interviews, I understand the film's downfalls are mainly due to the interference of a studio which never had any interest in the product in the first place. Eventually, sick of fighting studio heads, Dan Aykroyd and John Landis gave in and decided to concentrate on the music. But what I'd like to do is pitch you the Blues Brothers sequel that I would have made should I have been asked. Now, before you start kicking off in the comments, this isn't me telling John Landis how to make movies. It's a thought experiment of what would happen if we took the end point of Blues Brothers and started something new. So here we go. We start exactly the same way that Blues Brothers 2000 does, with Elwood getting out of prison. 16 years have passed and Jake has been released before him because of Elwood's additional traffic violations keeping him behind. Elwood walks to the street and waits for his brother. He waits and he waits and he waits and he waits. But no one turns up for him. A day passes. Still no car. Eventually, a vehicle pulls over and goes, "Hey! Aren't you Elwood Blues?" It turns out, whilst in prison, the Blues Brothers' fame has skyrocketed. They're now like Elvis. They're like Elvis and the Rolling Stones combined. Everybody knows them. Everybody loves them. This guy in the car was at their concert, 16 years ago, the one where they got arrested. And he's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're out again. You're going to reform, right?" He goes, "Well, I don't know about that. I only sing with my family." And the guy in the car says, do you need a ride anyway? It would be an honour. I would take you anywhere in the country. But obviously he decides to go to central Chicago. And in the car the entire time, the guy's bending his ear about how great the band is and how he loves everything they did and how that night changed his life. And his kid's going to be called Elwood whenever he gets round to having one. Elwood thanks the guy and sends him on his merry way and goes to see his band. The band are coasting off the fame of having played with the Blues Brothers. They were clearly, on the downward turn of fame. So they've been spoilt by the excesses of life. They're quaffing champagne. They're eating caviar with their hands. They're wearing velvet suits. And they've lost the love of the music. They're just playing the same old hits, but without the frontman. And they see Elwood walk in the room and like, oh my God, we can reform. We can get to the high days again. We can have the glory days once again. This is going to be fantastic. But Elwood's not interested. He goes, "What the hell is this shit? This is not what it's about. We're about the music. We're about the sound. We're not about velvet suits." But the band are desperate to reform. But Elwood is not interested without Jake. The band take Elwood to see the Penguin, who, again, is doing very well for herself. The orphanage is incredibly well funded. Everyone's happy. All the children are happy. They're all going to nice homes. The Mother Superior is overwhelmed with joy. And Elwood says, "What happened here?" Because it's your brother Jake. He came here, sort us out. He's donated so much money. He's been like an extra father to all of these children over the years. If he was here right now, I would ordain him as saint myself. God bless that man. God bless him. So Elwood and the band go to get another police car. And they go to this used car lot. And they enter the office and they find a girl with a broom. She's sweeping up and she's singing to herself. But she has got a voice of a soul singer. She's like Janis Joplin reborn. She's like Janis Joplin and Tina Turner combined. She's got such lungs. She's like the young girl from America's Got Talent who sang Too Hard to Handle. She's just got a voice beyond her years. And Elwood and the band freeze as this girl sings into the broom handle, unaware that they are there. And she turns around and sees them and she, "Oh my God!" And that's when the band whisper into Elwood's ear, "Ask her to tour with us." And Elwood has to, because you can't pass on talent like that. He goes, "Would you like to tour with us? As soon as I find my brother, we're going to need a support band. And she's flattered because, you know, she knows who Elwood is. Everyone knows who Elwood and Jake Blues are. She goes, I would love to, but, you know, I would need my dad's permission first. And he goes, okay, where's your father? I'll have a word with him. And she points to a guy in the garage under the hood of a car. So Elwood goes out there and says, excuse me, sir. This guy turns around and suddenly we see it's James Belushi. Oh my God. And Elwood is just like, you look so familiar. And the guy's like, yeah, what? You don't have a brother, do you? Because I wouldn't know, I'm adopted. And Elwood pauses and thinks. And James Belushi says, is that all you wanted? Because no, your daughter's very talented. I'd like her to tour with the Blues Brothers show band. Is you're Elwood Blues? Yes, I am, sir. My daughter's 15. That's when Elwood's face suddenly drops and oh, blast. She doesn't go anywhere. And Elwood goes, yeah, I understand that, you know, school and education, and you'll stay off the street. He goes, she doesn't go anywhere without a chaperone. And Elwood's face suddenly lights up and goes, well, sir, you're more than welcome to join us. Like, hell yes. He throws down his things and rips off his overalls and he goes, I've wanted to get out of this place for years. And they get into the car and they drive off. Then the band, Elwood, the girl, go to all the places where Jake was last seen, picking up clues to what's happened and what's gone on. And people were just saying, oh yeah, I've seen him. Oh no, I remember him. Oh, it was great. No, he refused to sing, but he was fantastic. I hope you find him. Send him my love when you do. And they pick up band members on the way, new band members. Mighty Mac Mateo is John Goodman in the thing. They pick him up because Elwood refuses to sing because, you know, he doesn't sing without his family. So he's stuck behind the harmonica and they get the barman up to sing as well. And he turns out to be fantastic. And he duets with James Belushi and the girl and it's amazing. Everyone's saying, this is magic time. This is magic time. As soon as we get Jake back, this is going to be fantastic. This is going to be the golden time. We're going to be on top of the world again. That's when Elwood sees a poster for a Battle of the Bands down in New Orleans. He knows Jake will be there because they've spoken about this so many times when they were in the joint together. You know, when we get out of here, we're going to play that Battle of Bands and we are going to storm it because it's a huge cash prize. But they think we are going to storm that band there because every good band has stormed that thing, and you're not anybody until you have stormed that night. They decide to head to New Orleans because Jake would not miss this for the world, and he's bound to be there. Elwood goes to see Cab Calloway, just to tell him his plans and where they're going. But instead of finding Cab, they find his son, Joe Morton, who's a cop. He recognises Elwood and seizes with a bunch of criminals. The band were all convicted too, if you remember. Thus, breaching his parole. Elwood and the band hightail it out of there with the police in tow. And there's a massive car chase and there's spinning cars and car crashes and jumps and leaves as they're chasing the Blues Brothers. And they end up sort of stuck in a large warehouse building and they're surrounded by the cars. It's like a hostage situation. All the cars surrounded with their lights on. Come out, Blues! We know you're in there. And inside, the band and Elwood and everybody all have their head in their hands, and Elwood's going, I'm never going to sing again. I am never going to sing again. What the hell is going on? They're never going to get to New Orleans. They're going to go to prison again, and it's going to be a disaster. That's when the young girl realizes this warehouse is a fashion warehouse. She finds lots of outfits everywhere. Without even realising, they've hatched a plan. Outside of the warehouse, the cops are all planning to storm the building. And they're all getting the SWAT team out and they're all putting their bulletproof vests on and their helmets. And they're all ready to storm the building. Joe Morton gets on the megaphone. All right, Blues, we're coming in. And that's when a voice comes back and goes, don't bother coming in. I'm already out. And that's when they turn and look to the side. And they see a figure in a black suit and hat and sunglasses, and it's like, quickly after him. And that's when they notice there's another person in a black suit and sunglasses, and another, and the entire band, and Mac McTeer, and James Belushi, and the girl, and they're all dressed in Blues Brothers uniform, and the cops don't know which one to go after. It's Elwood Blues they want. He's the ring, and it's spinning around. And they're confused as hell, and the Blues Brothers, of course, get away. The police, of course, are still in hot pursuit, but they get to New Orleans, they storm into the building, because we're the Blues Brothers show band. He goes, what's your fucking Blues Brothers show band? I know who you guys are. Because we want to play. And they're taken behind the curtains, they all get set up, they're ready for everything. And they think, all right, we're ready, all right. And the stage manager's, all right, guys, you're on in 5 minutes. And I was like, we can't go on. Jake's not here. I just like, we've got to do this. We can't not do this now. He's like, I don't sing without my family. And that's when there's a knock at the door, and Aretha Franklin enters. She's there with her lawyer to issue divorce papers to Matt Guitar Murphy. There's a sad feeling in the air. He goes, it's all right, you were married to the band, not to me. It's fine. And then she turns to Elwood and goes, I'm sorry to hear about your brother. And Elwood says, what did you hear about my brother? Elwood, honey, he died. And the air goes out of the room as we're all sad and go, oh, no one told me. And he says, what do we do now? And Aretha Franklin says, you sing, honey, that's what you're born to do. And I don't sing without family. And that's when the young girl says, we're your family. And that's when the curtains open and there's a humongous cheer. And everyone's going, wow, it's the Blues Brothers! I love the Blues Brothers! And Elwood turns and sees the biggest audience he has ever seen in his life. It is like a stadium gig. They're screaming. He slowly approaches the microphone and goes, good evening. I'm Elwood Blues. And this is the Family Blues. And that's when the band strike up. This one's for my brother, who couldn't be here today. Then the band kicks into the best song you have ever heard. The biggest sing-along sort of like, everyone gets a line. Everybody has a cameo. Eddie Floyd's there. Wilson Pickett comes along. Aretha Franklin has a few lines. Sam Moore's there. B.B. King does a bit. Eric Clapton. Everybody who is anybody gets a line. Joe Morton and the cops are in the audience. Just the music possesses him because Cab Calloway's blood runs through his veins. He can't help himself from singing at all. He's on stage. They're, no, this is fantastic. And of course, they win the Battle of the Bands. And they have a massive group hug because they're with their family. That pitch took a lot more time and effort than it really should have. Before I go, I'd just like to say that I don't have a Patreon. This channel is not monetized. I also don't ask for people to like, share and subscribe. It would be nice if you enjoyed this, if you just left me a little comment in the bottom. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, until next time, I'm Scott Kingsnorth and I'm making a movie.